Welcome.
Thank you, Shelby. I'm so happy to be here with you and the wonderful Success community.
Thanks so much. Well, I know we recently had a feature about you in the magazine, but for those who haven't had the opportunity to read that story in the December 2015 issue, you say the greatest myth is that stress-free living exists at all. What do you mean by that?
Because in reality, there is no such thing as stress-free. And the only time you and I will ever be stress-free is when we're dead. Because the stories we've been hearing and telling about stress are really very different from what stress is. In the broadest sense, a stressor is any kind of stimulus that knocks you out of balance. And that stimulus can be real, it can be imagined, it can be good, it can be bad. And Shelby, the devil of modern stress, I always say, lies in the particulars of how you're thinking about the things that are happening to you.
So the devil is in the details, huh?
The devil is in the details and the stories.
So then here's, I guess, the question that I'm sure people are dying to know or ask. Are we as stressed as we really think we are?
Oh, you're trying to catch me because that's a trick question. And the answer is yes, you are as stressed as you think you are. And you're also as unstressed and grateful and joyful as you think you are. And the key here is, of course, perception, yours. And no matter who you are and what's happening to you, you have the power to tell better stories that serve you and your goals.
So we're doing this to ourselves, in essence.
Well, I've written a lot about this constant, ever-present stress that seems to surround us and follow us in our lives. And there are many reasons for why we're doing it to ourselves. And I address lots of these in my book. A big one is that we humans are essentially storytelling creatures. How we make sense of our world is by telling stories. And, think of all of our mythology going back thousands of years. And the reality is that we just haven't been telling the best stories for the past half century. There are many, many reasons for that, and we are not to blame for all of those. But the good news is that it is entirely in your power to tell better stories that serve us, that serve you. And we hear a lot about resilience these days and how to develop it. Well, the core of resilience is the ability to tell good stories about the things that have happened to you and that are happening to you and that could happen to you.
So that's that kind of inner tape in your mind, that inner dialogue, telling the best stories, telling better stories for yourself, and then telling the right stories, I guess, making sure that the message that you're saying is not of negativity, but of positivity?
It's the ultimate way of being entrepreneurial. It is taking what you have and figuring out what to do with it. That is really the story of stress, is you are where you are and what has happened has happened. Now, how can you turn that into something that can actually serve you? And the answer is, of course, different for every single person.
Well, speaking of different then, so there's different kinds of stress. Tell me a little bit about what those different kinds of stress are, and is stress really all bad?
The answer is no, not all stress is bad. There are 3 broad categories of stress, and it's really important that we learn how to see stress across a spectrum and not just as bad. There's first the toxic stress, the kind that we basically talk about all the time. Stress is killing me, it's killing me, it's killing me. But there's also good stress, which is we also know it as acute stress. And that is the life-saving, life-enhancing kind of stress that can help you jump out of the way of a speeding car or ace a test or give a fantastic speech or even lean into the excitement of a first kiss. It helps you recover better from surgery and so much more. And then there's the third kind, and that is tolerable stress. And that looks a lot like toxic stress, except that it's accompanied by breaks and buffers and protective factors like community or prayer and meditation or exercise and lots of other things. And the key, of course, is to stop painting every kind of stressor with the same toxic brush.
Okay, so toxic and tolerable can be both, I guess, big stressors, but it's your perception of it. So then if you're painting the broad brush that everything is toxic, everything is a disaster, I'm so stressed, I don't know what to do, woe is me, then yeah, that's going to have that toxic effect on your body. But I guess then you're saying realize the difference between toxic and tolerable.
You're exactly right. And here's what you need to know, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the difference between toxic and tolerable, and I think this will be helpful to a lot of people. The most important thing you need to know about toxic stress, 3 things. 1 is that it is incredibly strong. 2 is that it's unrelieved. It's an unrelieved activation of your body's stress management system. And 3 is that there are no protective factors or buffers. So if you can imagine your day as a series of peaks and valleys, if you're going from peak to peak to peak, stressful situation to stressful situation, then you're wading into dangerous territory. This is by definition chronic stress. It's the kind that lasts a long time. It's very strong. It lasts days and weeks and months and even years. And there's nothing protecting you. And that is when you're beginning to wade towards these murky waters of disease.
So now that we know that there's good and bad forms of stress and toxic and tolerable, help us identify it in our everyday lives. How can you tell the difference, or what are some of the manifestations or the symptoms of toxic stress in your life?
Well, basically, the key is to learn how to stress better. The key, everybody says, is to try to live a stress-free life. And research actually shows that a stress-free life is not ideal, that you are healthier and you will recover better and have a better prognosis and live longer if you're able to stress better by alternating between high and low stress, right? And so if you're alternating between periods of high stress and periods of low to no stress, what does that look like? Well, that depends on you and what works for you. Because the bottom line is that regardless of what it is that represents a valley for you, those periods of low to no stress, you have to be very deliberate in building those pockets into your day. Whether that means that you had a really stressful meeting and then you go out for a walk between that meeting and your next meeting, or you listen to music, or you enjoy a cup of coffee while sitting in a dark closet or room. So the key is to create these buffers and protective factors. What are protective factors? Community is a beautiful protective factor. It's a very potent and important protective factor. Exercise is a great protective factor. Interestingly, exercise is both a stressor and a stress reliever. So you have to figure out what it is that you will do. That's step 1. And step 2 is you have to figure out how to build it into your day every day. Now, these pockets of low to no stress are important, but so are occasional vacations, right?
Yeah.
They're very, very different things. So you will not be stressed. You say, I'm going to be stress-free when I go away to my, Hawaiian vacation or silent retreat. That's great. You should do that, definitely. But that does not take the place of peaks and valleys in your everyday. That is how you stress better.
So what you said about pockets, I think, is interesting, because something that I've noticed. So we here at Success have been working on our podcast, and this is kind of a new thing for me. And so something I've been doing in scheduling is scheduling a 30-minute block before we go into recording to basically, and I've been just telling my managing editors just to go hide. I'll go read something, I'll put some headphones in, and I'll use that time to just completely kind of decompress, so that way I don't go into the recording with, kind of already a high pitch or a fever pitch, or worse, not completely aware of where I am, what I'm thinking, what I'm saying, and just kind of going through the motions. And so I'm very relieved to hear that what I thought was kind of quirky and diva-like is actually a recommended stress strategy.
Remember your peaks and valleys, and you already know that there are going to be lots of peaks, so you have to be very deliberate about your valleys, about building in your valleys. And you know what? I call them small pockets of joy. And one of mine, by the way, is savoring a really good latte and a donut.
I love that.
I'm trying to demystify, for people, because one of the things that I do is I ask people that I see handling stress really well, like, what are their pockets of joy is what I call. And I swear to God, you don't know how many people who do a really nice job of building in these pockets of joy tell me coffee Like, I take my coffee, I go to the rooftop, I sit there, and I just drink it slowly by myself. And so, as it turns out, just taking a coffee break or being by yourself, or just savoring anything like a donut. I mean, we have so much guilt around stuff. And
well, that's the thing though. Like, so yeah, if you're sitting there and you're eating this donut and you're feeling bad and you're hiding it and you're trying to look as less piggy as possible when you're eating this donut, you're totally missing the point that, oh, this is good. This is making my belly happy. I'm having a fat kid moment where I'm loving this donut, and that's okay.
Totally. I mean, really. And it's not even like, it just is a joy moment. I think about how we as children used to relate to things like donuts and play and dancing, and sort of the abandon that we all had as children about these things is how we need to bring that back into our lives. The way that we looked at a donut. I tell my kids they're not even allowed to talk about calories. And I tell them they're not allowed to count them. They're not allowed to. What they need to do is figure out how to establish moderation, and that's really important. So they need to say, okay, did I eat lots of good things today? Did I eat lots of bad things today? But just that, it's this thing where we are approaching everything with fear. And I'm telling you, when you make decisions from fear, you will make the wrong decision every single time. And so much of how we relate to things from a place of fear is why we are as stressed out as we are.
Yeah, I was just reading, I was rereading an article on success.com about Sophia Amoruso, the founder and CEO of Nasty Gal. And in her recent book, Girl Boss, she says that without a doubt, whenever I question myself, whenever I doubt myself, whenever I lose any of that confidence in a decision, I will make the wrong decision every single time, that it will be a failure no matter what. And so just going into it and just, yes, this is it. This is the decision I'm making, and I'm going to do this, and it's going to be great. And if it doesn't and I fail, that's okay, because that's part of the process.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you brought that up, by the way. This idea of being terrified of failure. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with concepts of design thinking. I actually helped on a teaching team at the design school at Stanford. And it's really not about interior design in any way. It's about taking, sort of having empathy with the situation, looking at how people interact with it, taking that and building an experience or a product from a place of what do people need? What is it that they really want? What is their need in this particular moment? And then one of the most important aspects of design thinking is being comfortable with failure. And that is one of the biggest aspects of our culture now, is that we are so terrified of failing, when really, if you look at design as iteration, that I'm going to come to this, I'm going to do the best that I can in this moment, and then I'm going to have the opportunity to then iterate and get better and get better and get better. People are helicopter parenting, they are micromanaging their employees, and really then people come to their jobs and their families with this fear of failing, when all failure is the ability to learn lessons and then move on to the next moment. And in Silicon Valley, we say success is getting up one more time than you fall. So really, this concept of becoming comfortable and relating to failure in a different way is so important when it comes to stress.
I love that. So your piece in this month's issue of the magazine talks specifically about how technology is diminishing our ability to focus, and therefore adding stress to our lives. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I was really interested in a recentish poll of CEOs worldwide, and take one guess as to what they identified as the single most important leadership trait for success.
Gosh, I don't know.
Creativity. Creativity. That's kind of amazing. Creativity and innovation. That is what allows people and businesses to handle and rise above what turns out to be an increasingly complicated set of issues and environments and things that we're dealing with really for the first time in history. Creativity is what lets you come up with novel solutions to what you might perceive as stressful circumstances. And what do you need for creativity and innovation? The ability to focus, to deep dive. And scientific literature highlights the need for us to establish these wide open, sort of sacred spaces, both inside and outside. And by sacred, I don't mean religious necessarily, although for some people it might mean that. But we need to establish these wide open spaces, both inside and outside, free of distractions, to create and imagine and put things together, and to simply be like you were creating for yourself, that half hour of sacred space before you go in to your next recording or meeting. And how many people do you and I know that have these wide open sacred spaces that are free of distraction, to focus, to create, to imagine, to solve problems and put things together? I don't know that many. I mean, in fact, technology seems to create for lots of people this sense that they have to work all the time around the clock. It's always on. Yeah. And it's the pings and the dings and the distractions and the constant, ever-present need to check things and to respond to things. That gets in the way of being able to be creative, to create these spaces for ourselves.
So always being on, that certainly we're checking email around the clock. We're always keeping an eye on things. I'm reminded of the chat program Slack and some of the others. I mean, I was looking into this. So Slack, their slogan is "Be less busy," but I can't help but think that's not true. Don't you think?
Well, okay, first I want to establish that I love technology. Having said that, what you ought to know about me is that I never, ever trust a slogan. I don't trust anybody's slogan, in part because I consult with so many corporations, and as a corporate lawyer, I've been there. I see how that sausage is made. So I don't trust anything, and I also don't think that things necessarily, something that works for one person will work for another person. What they say often, sometimes, possibly never, bears any relationship to reality. The question I ask my executives when it comes to technology is it serving you? And are you now using this app or using this program or using this device in a situation where you are serving the technology, or is it serving you?
Right.
It's a really important and really personal question that you have to answer for yourself. I always say just because you can doesn't mean you should. And there's a lot of that in our culture now because, by gosh, we have access to so many things that people couldn't have even dreamed about in the past. So stress is ultimately the story of moderation and personal sustainability. The real issue with technology is not whether it's overwhelming or hurting us, but whether your everyday habits and practices are sustainable over the long term. And for lots of people, the answer is no.
So let me hear your side of this then. So Amanda, how do you relax and refresh to manage your own stress?
I hike out in nature almost every day. And when I don't, I can feel it. I go for bike rides. I take the Ayurvedic herb ashwagandha every once in a while when I'm going through high stress situations. There's some really good research behind it, and it really works for me. I can tell a difference when I don't take it. Lavender essential oils do miracles for me. I have a diffuser, and when I really need to, I turn on my diffuser. And Shelby, I have this really I have this theory that if I could dance once a week, I would be 20% happier.
I love that.
That doesn't happen all the time, but I do think that when I do it, it really helps relax and refresh.
I think we need a dance party.
Oh my God, do we ever?
Okay, Amanda. So let's do some rapid fire questions as we wrap things up, because I'd like to hear some fun answers from you. So, what is your guilty pleasure?
I love being alone, and I often feel guilty about taking the time to go and be by myself. I have kids and a family and lots of people who depend on me for work. But I have to say, being alone is my guilty pleasure.
I love that. So you find a magic lamp and the genie grants you 3 wishes. What would you wish for?
I hate that particular question just because I never know what to say. And then I sort of, like 10 hours later, I'm still thinking about it. if I could create an umbrella and have it be health and joy and travel, and that's not just for me, but, possibly for me and my family and then everyone. See what I mean? I just thought that question always ties me up in knots.
I love that, though, the umbrella.
Yeah.
What book is on your Kindle right now, or your bedside table?
Winning the Story Wars. And the subtitle is Why Those Who Tell and Live the Best Stories Will Rule the Future. And it's by a guy named Jonah Sachs. It is a phenomenal book I think it's on Harvard Business Review Press, but I highly recommend it.
All right, Amanda, how do you define success?
So the prologue to this is that I have learned in my research of stress to really define success differently than how it's often defined for us. A lot of people put a monetary value on success. A lot of people look at trappings. A lot of marketers try to use the concept of success to terrify you into buying their product or to lure you into buying their product. What I have realized, when you look at stress as a guide, you find that success is figuring out what your particular gift is in life, what your purpose and passion is in life, and then not just stopping there, right? But also figuring out how to use that gift, because everybody has it, figuring out how to use that gift to serve yourself and your family, but not to stop there, to also serve your organization and your community and your world. So success to me is being in your zone, figuring out what you're gifted with, and then figuring out how to use it to serve others.
All right, Amanda, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate the time and the insight that you've given us, and I look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thank you, Shelby. I'm so excited about everything that you guys are doing.
Hey there, Shelby here again. Now, considering this was my first interview for the Success CD and something that I normally consider pretty stressful, I felt pretty refreshed after our conversation with Amanda. She had some great points about understanding stress and how we can better handle it in our lives. So I just wanted to recap a few of the important things that she shared with us today. First and foremost, we should understand there's actually 3 kinds of stress. There's toxic stress, and that's the really bad stuff. There's tolerable, and that's the stress that we feel that we can handle. And then acute or good stress. And this is actually the kind of stress that pushes us to be better. The key to remember is that the difference between toxic and tolerable stress is our perception of it. My dad always said perception is 90% of reality, and I think that's definitely the case here. Another point Amanda made was about finding pockets of joy in our day. Stressful events are like peaks in our day. We can't function moving from peak to peak without taking some time in the valley to gather ourselves and start fresh again. Finally, Amanda asked an important question about the use of technology in our lives. When it comes to apps and devices, she asked us to consider, is the technology serving us, or are we serving the technology? So, when responding to all the dings and beeps and notifications in our lives, remember, just because you can doesn't necessarily mean that you should. The point is the technology serving you? I hope you enjoyed my interview with Amanda Anayati today. We want to hear what you learned and how you're combating the toxic stress in your life. Email us at you@success.com, that's YOU, and keep listening for more great ideas and tips on how to relax and refresh in your life.